what we have is a switch, a 3750, and by the way, you have a 3750 in the collaboration lab as well. And you've got some phones over here. We'll start off with HQ when we're looking at campus infrastructure. We've got some phones over here, and we've got 3 different VLANs that we have over here. We've got our data, our voice, and our server. If you sat the lab before, don't quote me on this, but, well, you can quote me because it's recorded and you will quote me, but I think it's always the same VLAN tags. But just make sure that if you sat the lab before, that they are the same, but I'm confident that they are. It's a layer 2 switch, so layer 3 is handled by R1. Okay, this router here is called R1. It's the HQ router, side A router, same router, okay? So you're going to have 3 sub-interfaces over here. These may or may not be created. You need to have a look, have a quick look. Go to R1, look at the gigabit or fast Ethernet interface over there, 3 sub-interfaces. Do you need to put in the IP addresses? Do you need to put in encapsulation .1q, those tags? Is native VLAN being asked for here? If there's no mention of native VLAN, then don't set the native VLAN, leave it to the default of 1. So we've got R1. Have a quick look at that. Don't underestimate the power of no shutdown. Okay, I did a class about a month ago, and in this class, in my base configuration, for the first time in years, I just decided to leave the interfaces shut down, the fast Ethernet interface there, or the gigabit interface here. Oops. So it's amazing what happened, because when I shut down this interface, I had 16 people in the class. I'd say at least half the people were unable to get DHCP, to ping Core Manager from the router. I can't ping the Core Manager cluster, which is located over here. I can't ping from R1. Including myself, to be honest. I tricked myself. I was looking at the .1q trunk. Was the VLAN being allowed? Was the VLAN there? Was this interface configured correctly? Was the access VLAN there? Was that interface okay? And half the class were unable to fix it. I am not kidding you. Half the class. Simply because I decided to shut down that interface. Okay? It's amazing that people overlook the most basic things. Okay, you go straight to the advanced thing, the advanced parts of it, looking at VTP, the VLAN, and just start off at layer 1. Always start off at layer 1. Okay, make sure the interfaces are up. First thing, show CDP neighbor as well. That means the interfaces are going to be up. Same thing over here on your WAN interface, over to the branch sites, to branch 1, to R2 and R3. Make sure those interfaces are up. So probably the first thing, or one of the first things you're going to look at. Okay, what reminds me, what would you have done beforehand? You probably, in the lab exam, you've probably gone through the pre-configuration that you must read this before you start the lab. There is a sheet of paper there that they will give you. You'll have to look through that and follow those instructions. That's the first thing you're going to do in the lab exam. Okay, go through their instructions. This will probably tell you how to connect to the devices. If there's any problems that you suspect with the hardware, tell the proctor in the first 10 minutes, should we say. So that's the first thing you're going to do. You're probably going to browse through the lab very quickly. Maybe it's going to take you 10, 15 minutes to quickly look through, find out, is there a 3CM site or is it 2CM site with site C as a CME site? I'd say more like 5 to 10 minutes rather than 10 to 15 minutes. So we're looking at maybe this is half an hour in. You go to R1, you look at the interfaces, show CDP neighbor, are the interfaces no shut? Do you have the sub-interfaces created? Okay, for the data, voice, and server, or whatever they call them. And then you're going to go to the switch. So I'm going to now just go to my switch. Whoops, where is my switch? Okay, so what would you do the first time you get to the 3750 switch? Well, first of all, there are other devices connected to the switch, such as your PSTN phone. Don't do an interface, range, fast Ethernet, port 1 to port 24 and configure. Do not do that. Only configure the specific interfaces. It's very important because there is this PSTN phone, I think, connected here. There's other devices that are not in your control. There are interfaces there that where it says, do not touch this interface. So quite a common mistake I've seen is people just configuring the wrong interface, doing the whole lot and doing all 24 or 48 ports. Don't do that, okay? Find out, okay, probably the first thing you want to start off with is show CDP. Shows, what am I looking at here? Show CDP. Well, number one, CDP is enabled. They could have just disabled CDP, no CDP run globally. CDP is not working, the phone's not going to register, okay? So that's the problem. CDP version 2 needs to be enabled because this is how the voice VLAN, this is how the phone learns its voice VLAN, okay? So this command, my phone here is connected to 1023. You'll need to find the appropriate interface. I'm going to put in switch port voice, voice VLAN, what's my VLAN? 102, I think it is. This command here is redundant if that is disabled, okay? So this command here does nothing. The switch cannot learn its voice VLAN if CDP version 2 advertisements is disabled. So make sure that's enabled. Otherwise, what will happen is the DHCP broadcast from the phone, because the phone hasn't learned its voice VLAN, the DHCP broadcast will be on a VLAN, be on the data VLAN, okay? It'll be on the wrong VLAN, okay? And there'll be a problem. You haven't got DHCP scope there, or if you do, it's the wrong DHCP scope. It's going to get the wrong IP address, and that's your best case. Okay, so CDP version 2 is enabled. We're going to, before I just go into configuring the phone interface, let's just, in fact, let me just play a little trick. Imagine you just close your eyes and cover your ears and sing to yourself for a second. I'm going to do a no VLAN 102. Okay, actually, it's just fine. Okay, come back. So you listen to me again. So in this interface, I'm going to type in switch port, voice, VLAN. Now I'm just going to use a VLAN tag I've never used before. Let's put 777. Okay, now I'm on the console here. I'm logging to the console as well. The lack of a message there, it's very significant. Very significant that there's no message there, because what would happen if you added a VLAN, if you assigned a VLAN to a port and that VLAN wasn't there? You get this message where it says VLAN 777 is not there, adding it now, okay? But the lack of a message, that means the VLAN must be added, right? You'd think VLAN 777 must be there because there's no message, no information message there telling me it's adding VLAN 777. Do show VLAN, okay? 777 is not there. So you need to always make sure that the VLANs are actually present and created. So the lack of a message was very telling to me. I was worried there was no message. That must mean 777's been added. Well, it hasn't. Well, if I try and add VLAN 777, it tells you your answer. You can't add it because it's in client mode. Now, maybe there is a VTP server, but I don't think so. There's only one switch here. You need to be the server. So you need to change this VTP mode either transparent or make it the default of server. Okay, and then if we go in there and add the VLAN, and there's the message I'm talking about. Voice VLAN doesn't exist, creating VLAN 777. So always make sure, the point is, always make sure the VLANs are there before you go in, assign them. Okay, in my case, I'm going to be using 102 as my voice VLAN, 101's my data, 103, they're already there. Okay, so always run this, as well as show CDP, show VLANs your next command on the switch. Okay, so my VLANs are there. At this point in time, you're going to go in and just configure it. Everyone knows what to do here. Switch port access VLAN 101, and then switch port voice VLAN 102. Why not put spanning tree port fast in? Okay, they're not going to give you points. They're not going to say to you, for 3 points, make sure the phone takes as long as possible to boot up. I don't want to break any NDA in this class, but I'm going to have a wild guess that that will not be a question. Okay, so why not put in spanning tree port fast? The phone will boot up as quickly as possible, and you're not going to break any requirements. Okay, so no shut. You should see the phone show CDP neighbors. Probably something you should run at some point in time. You should see your phones connected there. Okay. The next thing, so you've got your, obviously you will have more than one phone interface, so you can either use the range command to address all 3 interfaces there, or just put the same commands in 3 times. The next thing, so I've got layer 2 all correctly configured here, I hope. CDP, did my check there, looked at the VLAN list, VLAN database. I've gone to the phone ports, phone interfaces, and configured voice VLAN, spanning tree port fast, access VLAN. Now, bear in mind the access VLAN is it's not required because there is no attached device in the PC port. So this PC that I've drawn here, it's what's known as a phantom device. It's not really there, but you're just being asked to configure or prepare the switch in case there was an attached device. So there's no real way to test that. That means you're probably not going to be adding a DHCP pool for the data VLAN. Probably going to restrict or confine your DHCP configuration to the phones. But just make sure of that. Because if you really are preparing for these phantom devices, if you're going to attach a PC to the PC port of the phone, you've got to think about layer 2 and layer 3. You need to think about the DHCP scope. So just make sure they're not asking for that, which I don't think they will. Okay, so what's the next step then? What's the next logical step we need to look at? Layer 3 is all handled by R1. How does the phone get to the core manager cluster? We need routing using R1. So we need to look at both ends of this trunk. We've looked at this one already. Right, we went there and looked at the gigabit interface and looked at the 3 sub interfaces there and make sure it was no shut, that it was configured with IP addresses, configured with the encapsulation .1q command with the right VLAN tag. We need to now go to this side of the trunk and make sure that's configured as well. So in my case, it's Fast Ethernet 101. Show CDP neighbor, you'll be able to see R1, but you'll be given this information. Just make sure it's port 1. Let's just take a look. Now ignore some of the QoS aspects. Everything up to there you can ignore. So we've got the trunk configured. .1q trunk is configured. No shut. Don't forget the basics. Okay. Show CDP neighbor. You should see our HQ router, R1. Is that side A router? I've called it. That's my host name. I'll probably change that later on. There's no native VLAN configured, and there's no allow VLAN command there either. Now, the lack of an allow VLAN command inside the trunk means it's a good thing. That means all your VLANs are there. If you did see, if I get an interface 101, switch port trunk allow VLAN 101, 103. That should set the alarm bells ringing. If you see allow VLAN, that means they've disabled some VLANs over this trunk. So in my case, this will be a troubleshooting question where they've probably said configure layer 2 and get DHCP working over here at HQ, but there are problems that are preventing DHCP from working. Okay, so this will be an example, a typical type of problem, which is kind of basic. So how you're going to fix this, okay, is you could do a switch port trunk allow VLAN all, but I'm not sure this is the right answer. Make sure you're just allowing the VLANs that are necessary, okay? But you need to make sure that If you are going to go with switch port trunk allow VLAN all, allow everything, then that's permitted. So if there's any text in the lab instructions telling you, you know, answer in the spirit of this lab, or what, I'm not sure the wording, but just make sure you are allowed to just allow all VLANs over the trunk. Okay, I will fix it correctly, better, and I'll just add the specific VLANs I need. Switch port trunk allow VLAN 101, and I need 10. Let's just do that. There's my fix. What's wrong with my fix now? Is that a good fix? I've allowed VLAN 102. I needed VLAN 102. Let's take a look at the interface again. Well, you've just allowed 102. What about data 101 and server 103? That's not the right fix. Okay, I should have put the command add 102. Whoops. Okay, I should have done that. Add 102. But I just put 102, which is bad. That means I'm just allowing 102. So we'll add 101 and we'll allow 103 as well. Okay, so all my VLANs are there. So what am I looking here in the .1Q trunk? I'm looking at it's configured with the right encapsulation type and as a trunk, not an access port. No auto-negotiate of that. I've nailed it to be a trunk. I'm allowing the right VLANs. There is no native VLAN. If there's native configured anywhere, make it match on both sides. It has to match. What we're saying is, if there's any untagged traffic, it's on this VLAN. Okay, that needs to be configured both ends of the trunk. In the absence of any instructions related to native VLAN, don't worry about it. Leave it as 1. Default's 1. Okay, but you must make it match. If it's native set on R1, make it match here. Switch port trunk native VLAN. Okay, whatever the tag is. Okay, no shut as well. And we'll probably return to this interface with some QoS, as you can see, but we'll come there in the QoS section. So, pretty much done with everything I'm going to do on the switch besides the QoS. And that begs the question, do you really want to do the QoS section? I'd say you want to do it earlier, sooner rather than later. Okay, so when you're on the switch, I'd say the QoS section, if you're daring, because the campus QoS is a really difficult section that the answer is always easy, but reading the question and interpretation is difficult. If you now will be the time to look at the QoS section and more or less be done with that switch. Okay, maybe you have to come back with DHCP in just a little while, but you know, looking at the campus QoS when you're reading through the lab, and the WAN QoS as well, by the way. The WAN QoS is a different ball game. That's easy, easier. Okay, so the WAN QoS section is a must-do, must-attempt. I'll address when you should do that in just a few moments, or later on today. But the campus QoS, if you can get the campus QoS section done in the next 10-20 minutes as well, you'll never need to go back to the switch. You can just save your configuration and not return, which is the nice thing. Okay, if you are unsure of the campus QoS, then you don't want to waste time getting 0 points. Unless you're 100% sure you know the answer, you know what they're looking for, then don't worry about campus QoS. You don't want to waste minutes, precious minutes, this early on, wasting time on and not getting points. So the lab is about $1,500. Okay, there's around 500 minutes. It's $3 a minute. If you spend 20 minutes, it means you're spending $60. You're giving $60 to the proctor. That's what it means. Don't give that $60 yet. If you have time at the end, go ahead and address the campus QoS section. But that's one of the most difficult sections. I think, again, this is all unofficial, just my gut feel. A lot of people don't do well in that section. Point is, if you know it, go ahead and do it now. If not, leave it to the end.